Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation news from across the nation. This week brought to you by Bass Pro Shops, Richard Childress Racing, Dallas Safari Club. Thank you all for your continued support. On this week's program, our lead story, CSI priority legislation to enhance access to public lands reintroduced in the Senate. That coming from Taylor Schmitz. We're talking bears in California. I fish, I hunt, I vote. We're talking about voter registration in Michigan. Good news out of Louisiana as it concerns modern muzzle loading and some legislative initiatives. And finally, we wrap up in Delaware, where Delaware introduces pro-sportsman knife legislation. Normally at this point, I would welcome in our guest. Unfortunately for you all, Taylor is on the road as he is so busy doing the great work that he does. And we are unable to connect in time for this edition to drop on time. So yours truly will be taking a crack at it. I'm bringing you his headline here, and then we'll go through the rest of it. Back to the title here: CSI priority legislation to enhance access to public lands reintroduced in the Senate. This from Taylor. America's federal public lands face a significant headwind of deferred infrastructure maintenance, roads, bridges, trails, campgrounds, etc., which can ultimately limit access for sportsmen and women. This legislation will help provide federal land agencies much needed financial resources to turn the corner on deferred maintenance. Last week, Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus member Senator Steve Daines and Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus co-chair Senator Angus King reintroduced the America the Beautiful Act, a bipartisan bill to help restore denigrated infrastructure across our public lands. In 2020, the Great American Outdoors Act, which was strongly supported by the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, was signed into law to provide permanent funding to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, as well as a $9.5 billion over 5 years to address the deferred maintenance backlog on federal public lands. This legislation builds upon the Great American Outdoors Act by reauthorizing a critical component of the 2020 bill. On Tuesday, May 1st, CSC member Senator Steve Daines and CSC co-chair Senator Angus King, as we said, reintroduced the America the Beautiful Act, which is a top priority for CSF. Specifically, the legislation will provide $10 billion over 5 years while also making improvements to the National Parks and Public Land Legacy Restoration Fund, the section of the Great American Outdoors Act that sought to restore infrastructure on federal public lands. Since 2020, the Legacy Restoration Fund has been instrumental in addressing the maintenance backlog across federal public lands to ensure these lands remain accessible for sportsmen and women and other outdoor enthusiasts. While the National Park Service, where access is often limited to fishing only, faces the largest backlog of $23.3 billion, other federal lands that provide critical access for sportsmen and women, such as Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the U.S. Forest Service, also face a collective maintenance backlog of roughly $17 billion. The reauthorization of the LRF will help address this backlog, the backlog changes facing our public land managers. CSF looks forward to working with Senators Daines and King to see the America the Beautiful Act become law in the 119th Congress. Thank you to Taylor for his reporting. Again, we miss you, Taylor. Safe travels. Definitely wish you were here to kind of expound more on this, but certainly positive direction here, and with both of those members bringing this back up and trying to get the ship right on that backlog work. Lord knows so many places need it, and we'll see if we can get this done. Taylor will no doubt be back to update us on this as the session moves forward. Let's now turn our attention to the West Coast. Our ever colorful colleague, Barry Snell, brings us this about bears. California is a beautiful western state with a long tradition of rugged individualism, including the most ancient human pursuit of fish and game. Hunting tradition is deep in California, a state where many sportsmen and women often associate with bad ideas currently. Many of which of those bad ideas now limit or restrict certain types of hunting. In turn, these restrictions have led to massive, virtually unchecked bear population growth, in turn, leading to violent and sometimes lethal human wildlife conflicts in the Golden State. The question is not if, but when California will be forced to return to its roots and get the bear population under control again, just as New Jersey did recently. A little history here. In 2012, California banned the use of dogs when hunting bears, leading to a massive population growth. Harvest fell over 50% in 2013, and in 2012, that was the last year the low bear quota was met. California Assembly Bill 1038 seeks to allow houndsmen to once again use dogs to motivate bears to move about their business away from human population centers, um, as a first step towards loosening bear hunting regulations. 1038 initially died in the Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee by a single vote, however, was granted reconsideration later in the day. Approximately 80 sportsmen and women were present during the committee hearing, with several testifying and over 60 filing petitions of support. Only a handful of people showed up to oppose the measure. Uh, Barry will get into the hilarity that ensued from those few folks here in a moment. Given the restrictions, the annual harvest quota has not been met, like Barry said, since 2012, the year the new restrictions went into effect. The quota currently stands at 1,700 bears per year, but without the use of dogs to most effectively sex and age bears, the number of bears actually harvested each year is just a fraction of that. California Department of Fish and Wildlife biologists have estimated that a full 16% of the bear population could be harvested each year, approximately 8,000 bears annually. Oof. And a healthy population at the appropriate management level could still be sustained. Wow. That's pretty wild. As things stand now, less than 3% of the state's bears are actually taken each year, which is not enough to moderate the population growth. The bear problem is bad enough that California Department of Fish and Wildlife was effectively forced into revising the state's bear management plan, which they released recently. Here, Barry provides the in article link, and as always, I encourage you to get to these articles that interest you, pique your interest, and then follow those links and do a little bit extra homework and learning on your end. Around 80 sportsmen and women showed up, the California Capitol for the hearing, many of them testifying in favor and filing petition of support. Only a handful of the opponents showed up, but the few that did provided rather entertaining testimony. These individuals made a wide variety of absurd suggestions regarding deterring bears, including honking your car horn at them, shooting them with paintball guns. Well, there's a brilliant idea. And the best of all, throwing a pine cone at the head to make them run away. Huh. Apparently, says Barry, all Californians need to do to protect themselves from the literal bear invasion is carry a vehicle with them at all times, as well as a paintball gun in a state that is hostile to guns, and have Nolan Ryan with a sack of pine cones. For you younger folks, that reference may be dating Barry and anyone else who understands that reference. I invite you to Google Nolan Ryan to appreciate the if you know, you know. To the man who made the pine cone comment, one baffled assemblyman asked, "Excuse me?" Thinking perhaps he had misheard the suggestion. Unfortunately, he did not. listen, not to get off on a rant here, but this isn't just specific to California, right? If you go to hearings, to fish and game meetings where we're looking at rules or any of these, and the anti crowd is there and they start running their yaps with their crazy ideas. This is not just a normally I'm good for picking on California, and Barry is too. But not in this case. I'm coming to their defense. It's just the anti-hunting crowd that is just they're off their rocker and they come up with the craziest damn suggestions with their backyard biology degrees that they have earned at the University of don't know too much. And then they come out with this throwing pine cones. Yes, let us instigate a fight with a bear. That sounds just awesome. And then also, pretty sure outside of hounding, most states have wildlife harassment laws where shooting them with paintballs definitely is going to fall in there and probably get you a citation. And if nothing else, you're kind of a jerk. You're going to go pepper bears with colored paintballs again, instigating a potential interaction that will definitely not go well for you, the would-be paintballer. Holy smokes. Do not throw anything at bears, and please do not shoot bears with paintballs. This is ill-advised behavior. But what is not is effective scientific management, and the use of hounds, as Barry is talking about here, has proven extensively productive insofar as motivating bears to move along. Some people call this harassment. This is legal harassment. Nothing's being done to the bear. They're not being hurt. They're just being inconvenienced, but we want them to move along, right? So we're motivating them by use of hounds, chasing them off a piece of property so they're not getting themselves in trouble. Because as soon as they attack somebody or get into someone's house or car or trash, and they're habitually doing it, or they get into livestock, these bears are going to get killed. We don't want to see the bears get killed. We don't want habituated bears, right? So not only do the dogs help in that aspect, but as far as hunting and meeting these quotas and being selective in what the take is, you have the distinct advantage of having hounds be able to tree bears, have the hunter and the guide, or just the hunter if they're well equipped, to look, assess that bear. Is it a male? Is it a female? Rough age? Does it have cubs? We don't want to take a sow with cubs, right? This is poor practice. There's just we've talked about this before, especially last year in Colorado. We covered it this year in Arizona with the hounding. Many benefits to using hounds in wildlife management, and they far outweigh what some of the silly people on the anti crowd think, whatever they think. Let's continue on with Barry. CSF maintains that the best way to prevent the ongoing explosion of dangerous wildlife human interactions in California is to diminish the population and keep it under control using hunting as the primary means of scientific management. Assembly Bill 1038 would be a big step towards the ultimate objective. And as noted above in the article, unfortunately, that bill lost by a single vote, but however, a few hours later in that same day was put up for reconsideration. So that means that the assembly can't rehear it this year, but it will be eligible again next year. So when the session begins again in January 26th, CSF and our in-state partners will have 21 days to get it through the Water Parks and Wildlife Committee. In the meantime, that means a large educational effort will be underway to get a couple legislators on the committee on the side of common sense and proven science-based wildlife management practices. Probably an education also for the general public is not a bad idea here. So, um, you know, folks making the final decision are also not just hearing from us, the sportsmen and women, they're also hearing from concerned citizens. I would like the suburban soccer mom crowd to stand up, the HOA crowd that constantly sees coyotes and lions and bears around their favorite jogging trails. Your opinion matters too, and I suppose that if you don't want your kids getting attacked or their baseball or soccer games being interrupted with wildlife coming too close and encroaching, here's your solution. Hunters can be your best friend, and the department has solutions. So the general public can get involved in this too, and I recommend it. Let's head over to Michigan. This from Bob Matthews. Some good news here. Sportsmen and women are the original conservationists, and as our sporting conservation heritage is threatened by a growing number of ballot box biology initiatives, it's imperative that hunters, anglers, and trappers participate in the political process, ensuring that each licensed purchaser that is eligible to vote is provided with a registration opportunity stands to strengthen the voice of the constituents most knowledgeable about fish and wildlife, sportsmen and women. Michigan House Bill 4136 was voted favorably 9-0 out of the House Committee on Election Integrity. The bill would require that resident purchasers of hunting, fishing, and fur harvest license be provided a voter registration application. As an organization policy priority, Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation provided testimony in favor of the bill and will continue to encourage its passage as the legislative process continues. So last week, this all happened. The Michigan House Committee on Election Integrity, as we said, unanimously voted House Bill 4136 out of the committee, sending it to the House floor for consideration. The bill, which has support from members of the Michigan Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, would require that resident hunters, anglers, and trappers be provided a voter registration application, which while purchasing a license. Sportsmen and women are a critical voice in the political process, and it has become increasingly true in recent election cycles. Around the country, extreme animal rights groups have orchestrated ballot initiatives that are devoid of science based wildlife management and instead stand to strip state fish and wildlife agencies, as well as sportsmen and women, of their ability to properly manage and pursue game species. Ensuring that more hunters, anglers, and trappers are stepping into the voter booth would strengthen the constituency's understanding of conservation issues, thereby better protecting fish and wildlife species and our pursuit of them. In the voting booth, the fishing boat, and the hunting blind, participation by sportsmen and women is critical to the continued success of American conservation. CSF will continue to support House Bill 4136 in Michigan and similar legislation across the country. Yeah, this is great, and I can tell you, off the heels of the 2024 election cycle and the build up to it, obviously we have our "I fish, I hunt, I vote" campaign, and I think the whole community understood that the numbers being bantied about. It was something like only 20% of licensed sportsmen and women were registered to vote, and even less show up to vote. So there are most states have, whatever their different agencies, the DMV, maybe an HHS, where people are going for services and they're getting involved in the government for those services. They do have this option, and there are good places for folks to get that registration to vote and become part of the process. We looked at that knowing that our community is deficient and lacking, and trying to take that one step further, at least putting it in the hand of folks when they're getting their license. It's a great step forward. That bill needs to pass, and where this isn't an option, rest assured we are working with our state legislative sportsmen's caucuses to bring this language, these kinds of bills forward, because again, recognizing the shortfall in the two prior major election cycles, to include the midterms that are going between them, we fall very short in our participation, of showing up to the voting booth. It's a right. It's a great responsibility that we all have. And hell, if I had it my way, and I was all of a sudden President Fred Bird, that's a big if. I for sure would ensure that any day that we go to vote as a country is a holiday, thereby taking away the excuse I got to get to work, or I got to do this, I got to do that. Now we got to show up, man. We all got to show up, especially the sporting community. That's our opportunity at change. for the good and stopping the bad if that's available there too, especially when it comes to these ballot box initiatives. Again, harkening back to Prop 127 in Colorado. Terrible, terrible idea. That worked. People showed up and voted that were so motivated. Imagine if everybody in the community stepped up. I think that would have been an even louder voice and result. And then it went the other way in Florida with Amendment 2, getting them folks the right to hunt and fish. That's a great thing, and we want people to be registered to vote so they can show up and vote for that. Something that is in our best interest as resident sportsmen and women of Florida. And we had that opportunity potentially in Maine and West Virginia in the coming West Virginia maybe next session, but right now currently working this very issue, right to hunt and fish in Maine. So if that does make it as a ballot initiative, we're going to want all these Maine sportsmen and women to show up and vote on voting day. Be registered, be ready to vote on this and act. And then also, your friends and family. But anyway, going back to Bob's article, this is great. This is good momentum, and definitely look forward to Bob working with the caucus there in Michigan, getting that across the finish line. Let's go for more good news. We're on a good news kick here. Let's keep riding that wave. We head to Louisiana. This from Marklands. Louisiana becomes the latest state to recognize the advancements in muzzleloading technology, such as the Fire Stick, that have enhanced the safety and reliability of traditional muzzleloading firearms. With a new method of take opportunity on the table, hunters in the sportsman's paradise will have expanded access to pursue our time honored traditions. Additionally, on the legislative front, Louisiana sportsmen and women are currently presented with an additional conservation funding mechanism at the state legislature that could help bolster wildlife habitat and wildlife management for generations to come. Well, that sounds good. Let's get into it. On March 4th, CSF submitted comments to the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries Commission, urging them to amend what constitutes a legal firearm during primitive firearm season in the proposed hunting regulations for the 2025-2027 seasons. During the commission's March 6th meeting, they voted to adopt CSF's suggested language into their hunting regulation changes notice of intent. On May 1st, the commission voted unanimously to approve the notice of intent as amended. On April 4th, Louisiana Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus member Representative Jacob Landry introduced House Bill 564, which establishes the Louisiana Conservation Incentive Program. On April 25th, CSF submitted comments in support of HB 564. And on April 28th, that very bill passed out of the House Appropriations Committee unanimously. Recent steps by the commission will provide hunters with a new and exciting opportunity this fall. Louisiana joins other southern states such as Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee in expanding opportunities during primitive firearms seasons by updating primitive firearms definitions. These advancements in muzzle loading technology allow hunters to utilize a safer and more reliable alternative to traditional black powder muzzle loading while maintaining that the projectile must still be loaded down the barrel. Additionally, allowing the use of new technology helps eliminate inconsistency often experienced when using muzzle loaders, allowed under the previous definition, while also avoiding safety concerns like double charging the propellant. It is a bad day if you've ever done that. On the legislative front, there's more good news to report for Louisiana sportsmen and women regarding Conservation Incentive Program, which is a voluntary program that provides incentives to private landowners in exchange for conservation actions on their property. Opportunities to fund projects through this program will benefit wildlife through forest stand improvement, putting more water on agricultural landscape to improve sustainability for waterfowl and wetland bird species, improving wetlands, prescribed fire implementation, and increased feral hog management efforts, increasing access through updating primitive firearm definition, as well as investing in private lands conservation to benefit resources held in the public trust are critical for hunters and anglers in the state. These individuals contribute over $40 million per year to conservation funding through hunting, fishing licenses, as well as excess tax on sporting goods. As we all know in this program, the user pay public benefit structure known as, say it with me, the American System of Conservation. You finished it. Funding. Very good. CSF thanks Louisiana Department of Fish, golly days, Wildlife and Fisheries. I'm choking. At its commission for working with CSF to update Louisiana's primitive firearm definitions. And we continue to look forward to working with the Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus in Louisiana and our partners to advance HB 564. Yeah, great stuff, Mark. Thanks for the reporting. And I know we've covered it, especially at the beginning of the session when we were introducing a lot of that updated language for muzzle loading. And you've heard our friends from Traditions on the program as well. It's just a good update, and we want folks to be safe out there, and that kind of technology really takes some of the miscues, missteps that can occur out in the field, especially when it's freezing cold and dark. When you're loading up and stuff, heading out, when most of these seasons take place, that doesn't alleviate the hunter from the responsibility. And there's certainly old tricks of the trade, marking your ramrod, things like that, to avoid those double charges. But stuff happens, and people maybe get complacent or don't remember loading a charge in the heat of the hunt, or just the excitement of getting out there. And we definitely don't want people dropping 200 to 300 grains of powder at once with two projectiles in there. That's like I said, that's a terrible, terrible day. Also, what's nice about this stuff too, now we're thinking about effectiveness with these variants. Your powder has the ability to get wet for condensation to build up there, and extreme changes in environment, going from very cold to warm. The warmth of your truck, if you're switching spots, things like that. That humidity can get into your powder, whether you're a pourer or you're a pellet folks. Any of that exposed powder has the ability to get wet, damp, and can cause the 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 power of that charge. So if you're like me, you run 100 grains behind a 250 grain sabo, you're expecting a certain punch of power, and you know that what that effective range is for that firearm and the distance, and that's effectiveness to take game. If you weaken that, that puts you in a precarious spot. We don't want to injure the critters. You certainly don't want to scare them away, and all of a sudden, instead of a bang, you get a pop fizzle. That's also a bad day. But this technology, it's sealed. It prevents the what I just said, talking about the moisture and the ability for that powder to get wet. It stops you. You're loaded that particular load. There's no double loading. So anyway, all good stuff here, and not a lot of states left in the country to update that, and where the update is needed, we're working on it. I know there's certainly some challenges in some of the more traditional Western states, but they have technology issues with optics and lighted knocks and who knows what. So this just kind of falls into that, and it's going to take some mind changing, but good news out of Louisiana to be sure. All right, wrapping up the show here. Let's go to Delaware as they introduce pro sportsman knife legislation. This from Kaylee Leager. Currently in Delaware, your Airfinger quote ordinary pocket knife must be a folding knife having a blade no bigger than 3 inches in length and cannot be mechanically assisted, what many states have erroneously defined as a switchblade. Senate Bill 108 repeals that requirement by amending the language of the statute, removing that it must be a folding knife, increasing the maximum blade length to 3 3/4 inches in length, and removing the prohibition and penalties surrounding switchblades. With the passage of Senate Bill 108, sportsmen and women will have the ability to possess certain types of knives that are used lawfully by hunters, anglers, trappers, and other outdoor enthusiasts. The legislation removes the ban on switchblades and removes the unclassified misdemeanor penalty for the sale or possession of these knives. Removing the prohibition would permit individuals to lawfully use and possess these knives, but they would still be subject to prosecution for deadly weapons related offenses were they to use such a knife during an attack or assault aimed at causing death or serious injury. While Senate Bill 108 currently does not have a hearing date scheduled, Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation is submitting written testimony in support of the legislation. Knives are used in everyday applications, not just while hunting, trapping, camping, or whatever outdoor ventures fires you up. Knives are often used by workers in the trades, such as plumbers, mechanics, carpenters, electricians, and so on. While more commonly used by daily tradespeople, pocket knives are also found to be possessed by your quote average Joe for the use for uses such as opening packages or letters or much more. Per the legislation's official synopsis, the act removes the prohibition in Title 11 of the Delaware Code related to owning and possessing certain types of knives that may be opened by one hand. Such cutting implements are lawfully used as tools by many working in the trades and are also popular among outdoor hunting and camping enthusiasts. Currently, despite common and myriad lawful purposes, such knives are treated as deadly weapons in Delaware and therefore subject to otherwise law abiding Delawareans engaged in lawful activities to criminal prosecution in the justice system. Removing the prohibitions would permit individuals to use such tools, but would still subject them to prosecution for deadly weapons related offenses if they were to use such a knife in the course of an attack or assault aimed at causing death or serious injury. That kind of feels like a no brainer. I think that would likely apply to any tool. Over the years, many states have enacted laws banning the sale, possession, use, and manufacture of certain types of knives. This includes knives the average person we've talked about that would consider common pocket knives. In some instances, states have kept laws that ambiguously refer to knives such as Bowie knife, dirk, dagger, and stiletto without clear definition. Stiletto is like a word my grandfather used. He's a knife guy. He thought that stuff was cool. I guess he might have been breaking the law. That's the thing about these knife laws, and you don't really think about it. We do, and then we do this stuff for the work, and we're aware of it, and we're in the trenches with it. But most people really have no idea. Many of you may be scratching your head listening to this. Like, what the hell do I have to worry about a knife? Well, you do because in states this stuff is on the books. Let's go back to it. In recent years, states have been repealing bans that were passed decades ago and liberalizing the allowances for ownership, possession, and the use of mechanically assisted knives. Previously, these bans were passed by attempting to redefine common pocket knives such as switchblades, gravity knives, and other knives, which, in some jurisdictions, are currently illegal. This deception has most frequently been applied to knives that are capable of being opened with one hand. One hand opening knives are simply that, a knife you can open with one. Oh, very good. Most one handed opening knives also possess a bias towards closure, which means it has a spring, detent, or other mechanisms that maintains the knife in a closed position until the bias is overcome with applied pressure. None of these knives in any other configuration meet the common definition of switchblade. Like my pocket knife right now is a 1, and then it's got that detent. I don't know, it seems kinda silly, like, if you're out there gutting a deer, you're field dressing, you're holding a leg and a haunch with one hand, you're trying to, like if you don't have a fixed blade and you got a what I just demonstrated, if you were watching and were showing this, you would have saw, but, this Benchmade knife here is that's pretty dang handy, and it locks and it's safe. But if you don't have that fixed blade and you gotta open that, I mean, I'm not sure why that was ever a a thing, but anyway, I digress. Federal government and most states have defined switchblade as any knife having a blade which opens automatically, one, by hand pressure applied to a button or other device on the handle of the knife, or two, by operation of inertia, gravity, or both. By way of explanation, a switchblade has a bias towards opening in that the spring that opens the blade is under constant tension or compression and is held from opening by a release mechanism in the handle. As soon as the blade is released by a button or other device in the handle, the blade opens automatically. Common folding knives have a bias towards closure in that the blade is not under tension to open. Rather, some mechanical means it is retained in the closed position until the blade physically moves by the operator. Yeah, let's get this updated. Holy smokes. An example of laws and definitions of days gone by. Yeah, let's get this squared away so that common tools of the trade literally aren't going to get you jammed up. I would wonder if most law enforcement guys, especially new guys and gals, are even aware of any of this. And that's not a knock on them. They got a lot to keep up with. And with so many states hostile to firearms, I think that takes the priority and just everything else that comes with being it. I gotta imagine some of them, like their gee whiz knife law knowledge is probably down at the bottom. But who knows? Maybe I'm completely wrong. And if I am, correct me. I just gotta guess, like, it doesn't seem to be a big deal. And if it's not, let's get this stuff updated and and just get it squared away. So more future reporting from Delaware, no doubt. That's the show for this week, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please do continue to subscribe, follow, fill in those stars. Again, you guys are helping the program grow. We appreciate it. And I invite you to go back to last week. Our feature presentation sat with director Angie Bruce out of Wyoming. Great conversation. Got a lot of good feedback on it. So if you've not checked it out, Angie's a great conversation. You'll enjoy it. No feature this week. Our next show, looking ahead here, will drop for you guys on our next feature on Thursday the 15th. And we got a little turkey camp talk. And after that, and after some fun, we're going to get into more fun. And that is talking with Mark Duda, a responsive management. Most people in the space that are into this stuff know who Mark is and his work over 3 decades. Fascinating stuff. He presented at NASC. I think I came home all fired up about it. Probably talked to you guys about it. But currently, as this show drops, I am with Mark, and we're recording this for the future drop and having these conversations. And it's the stuff we're going to talk about and get into. Looking at current trends, where are we as a community? Where are we with approval of our community? Things like that. And Mark's going to delve into that in a way that he can. That well, for me, quite frankly, gets me ready to run through a brick wall. So we're going to talk turkey, or we're going to talk some heavier stuff that I think all of you in the audience, legislators, uh, sportsmen and women, anybody is going to appreciate and enjoy. And hopefully we bring some solutions that in your state and your locales, you can start implementing some of this stuff. But more to come on the 15th with Mark Duda. And then we got some great stuff coming up from NSSF, our congressional clays recap, our Q2 federal policy update, what's going on there. So, and then holy smokes, we're like into July and the year is more than half over. I can't believe it. That's it. So we'll see you next Wednesday for another wrap roundup and the feature for the 15th. Thanks as always. CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. We'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks so much for tuning in. See ya. Before we sign off, make sure you're voting for the Wonders of Wildlife Aquarium. Johnny Morris's aquarium has been voted the best aquarium multiple years running. That vote is up again. So do us a favor, go support those who really support the heck out of us. And Johnny Morris and Bass Pro Shops, Wonders of Wildlife. Check out the voting for the country's top aquarium. And you can vote, I think, every day on that until you can't. So go check that out. Throw them your vote. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.